Konnichiwa everyone. Welcome to Kokakiko. Today I'm going to tell you 6 amigurumi tips which I think you should definitely know. I hope these will help you make your amigurumis better and easier. Tip number 1. Use a smaller hook. Many of you might have already known about this, but it is really important. Here are some balls I've made. Believe it or not, I had used the same yarn, the same pattern, so it has the same number of stitches for all of them. The only difference is that the hooks. I used a 5mm hook for the left one. It was what the label suggested. As you can see, there are some gaps between the stitches which show the stuffing. When we make amigurumis, we don't want that. I would say the middle one is nice and tight, just right for my amigurumi. The right one is really tight. If you'd like to make something really tight, it's worth a try, but I would say it was a bit challenging to crochet it. Tip number 2. Spiral joint and slip stitch joint. When you make a circle, there are 2 ways to join the circle. The differences are simple. When you've done the end of the round, and you just go on to the first stitch of your next round, that becomes spiral. If you make a slip stitch and a chain stitch and then go on to the first stitch of your next round, the circle becomes like a tree ring, adding a ring every round. Let's call it a spiral joint and a slip stitch joint in this video. Both ones have advantages and disadvantages. Reason 1. The seams. The biggest difference is this. As you can see, the spiral joint has no seams, but the slip stitch joint does have the seams. Reason 2. The beginning of the round. It is related to reason 1. Showing the seam means you can find the joint more easily. So you would know the beginning of the round more easily with this slip stitch joint. With the spiral joint, it is super hard to find the beginning of each round unless you use the stitch markers. But I will show you a solution for that at tip number 4. Reason 3. Changing colors. I'd like to show you these balls. They look pretty similar, don't they? But when you look at the joint, it is different. The one with the spiral joint is misaligned, but the one with the slip stitch joint is nice and even. Tip number 3. Invisible degrees. When you make amigurumis, I strongly recommend to use the invisible degrees. It's not that hard. In fact, it's pretty easy and simple, but it makes a big difference. Here are the balls with the regular degrees and the invisible degrees. Can you see the difference? The regular one makes big gaps, and I think it's kind of bumpy. But the invisible one, it's much better, isn't it? If you don't know how to make an invisible degrees, no worries. I'll show you how to make an invisible single crochet degrees. With the basic degrees, you insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull back through that stitch. Insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull back through that stitch, and pull through all 3 loops. With the invisible degrees, when you see the top, can you see the beads, the front loop, and the back loop? For the invisible degrees, we only use the front loops. You insert your hook into the front loop of the next stitch, and then you do the same with the next one. Insert your hook into the front loop of the next stitch, yarn over, pull back through the 2 loops, yarn over again, and pull back through the 2 loops. This is the invisible degrees. Tip number 4. Stitch markers. I guess a lot of people use a stitch marker or a scrap yarn or a clip to mark your stitches. If you are making a circle with a slip stitch joint, you might not need one. But if you are making the one with the spiral joint, you definitely need something to mark your stitches, as it is so hard to find the beginning of the round. Some people are using the stitch marker to identify only the beginning of the previous round. But if you need to go back 3 rounds or 10, what would you do? Here is the tip for that. Use a scrap yarn as a stitch marker, not only for the previous 1 round, but multiple rounds. All you need to do is to lay a scrap yarn over when you've done the last stitch of the round. You can count your round easily with this stitch marker. Also, if you'd like to mark the certain round, I make the scrap yarn loose like this, so I know where I stopped increasing or where I started decreasing. Once you are done, you can just put it out. Tip number 5. Where to increase, decrease. Here are 2 coasters that I made. One is hexagon, the other is circle. The number of the stitches is the same. The only difference is where to increase the stitches. This one I increased on the stitch that I increased at the previous round, and I kept doing it. I can kind of see the line of increasing, and that becomes the corner of the hexagon. With this one, I've changed where to increase every round. That makes a perfect circle. That's okay if you don't fully understand what I'm talking about. Here are some examples of written patterns to show you the differences. I hope this helps. As you can see, the position of increasing is changing from round 4. We can say the exactly same thing with decreasing too. All you need to do is change where to decrease. Now I have a question for you. I've made 2 balls. The one is increased and decreased at the same position each round. The other one, I changed the position each round. Can you tell which one I changed the position each round? The answer is A. As you can see, this is much smoother, isn't it? The B, actually you can see the lines of increasing and decreasing. So that is the difference between increasing and decreasing at the same position or the different position. Tip number 6. Stuffing. When you make amigurumis, especially by the end, you need to make some stitches with stuffing in it. I know it's not easy. But when you do it, make sure not to crochet the stuffing together, like I did with this one. I know some of you experienced the stuffing coming out before. In that case, do not try to pull those out. It will keep coming out like a tissue from a tissue box. You should use some scissors. So those are my 6 amigurumi tips. I hope you found this video helpful. If you like this video, please be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. ありがとう。